Please pray with me. Loving one, whether we're having a good day or a really bad day, there's something in your word for that time. There's someone in the stories of your people who's been through that. Thank you for that. Thank you for giving us so much to work with. So I pray that I've worked with it in a good way this week, and that my words are a reflection of your love and useful to your people. Amen.
Amen.
I've only got myself to blame, really. I chose the readings. And last week, I gave myself a really easy to answer question with a fabulously easy answer. What's the most important thing we've got to do? Love one another. There you go. Dead simple. Of course it's not that simple. Of course it's not that simple. How do you love your neighbour as yourself if you don't love yourself? How do you love someone when loving them means letting them go? How do you love when it hurts to go on breathing and every breath feels like you might shatter and dissolve? It's not that easy. So this week I'm going to ask the questions I don't have answers for. Sorry about that. But if I thought my job was to give you all the answers, I'm in the wrong denomination. You know, why pain? Why is trying to live a good life a struggle? Why do we end up in a place like Jeremiah is in this reading? It's not easy. And there is no simple answers. And you know, we've never had simple answers. Frankly, I don't much trust anyone who has a glib answer to these questions. We've got books like Job. He went through about the most awful time he could have been put through, really. And he got no answers, except, I'm here, I'm God, I know what I'm doing. I am not telling you what I'm doing, and I'm not telling you how it's going to work out. That's not really a hugely comforting answer a lot of the time. But it's the only answer Job got. Or Ecclesiastes, you know, he spends the whole time, it's all futility. And there's a God, and I'm going to serve him anyway. And it's all horribly hopeless. But there's a God, and I'm going to serve him anyway. And that's the book. We've never had easy answers. We still don't. Now, Jeremiah was not a happy man. Being a prophet is never easy, particularly when you know full well that what's about to happen is really bad news, and no one else wants to hear it. And, you know, some of the prophets became bitter. Some of the prophets became full of rage. I mean, you look at some of those books, some of those prophets were like anger up to here and over the top. Some of them were fearful and ran off, like Elijah. Jeremiah is depressed. He really is. And we're not always depressed for a reason we know about. Sometimes we are. Maybe it's stress that just goes on and on and on. Or it's living with pain that never goes away. Maybe it's frustration, like you've been banging your head against a brick wall for years and years and years, like poor old Jeremiah felt like. Maybe it's something a bit more temporary. The effects of anaesthetic. They were depressing. That was horrible. Or after you've given birth. Or maybe, frankly, you just don't know why. And it's just one of those things. And it happens. We're human beings, we're complicated. No one ever said we weren't. I didn't always know why I was depressed, and I've never really known why I stopped. I just know that it'll probably roll around again. Now, Jeremiah had a lot of reasons. Because despite his occasional outbursts, he didn't hate his people. He loved them. He really desperately wanted to give them good news. But he was a realist. He knew good times weren't coming. He knew that no matter how many other people were in denial and choosing to live in pink fluffy cloudland, Babylon was coming. This huge military juggernaut that had steamrolled over all the other little kingdoms wasn't going to stop at Judah just because they had Yahweh. They'd had it once. Once they stopped. Because they were trying to fight a war on 5 fronts and they didn't have enough time for Judah. But he said, it's not going to keep happening. One miracle was all you got. And you know, yeah, he was furious with them. I mean, who hasn't sometimes been furious with someone they absolutely love, who's, you know, you're doing your best for them, and they just don't seem to care or be grateful. Any parents in the room, for a start. But, you know, he loved them. He wanted it to be okay, and he knew it wasn't going to be. He had to wait till he was an old man before he had any good news to give them. And they didn't like it. They hated it. It reminds me of a bit in one of Pratchett, one of my favourite authors, and he says a bit about which was a very bad fortune teller, which is to say, she was accurate. People prefer fortune tellers who are actually bad at fortune telling. They tell you what you want to hear. They're very successful. The ones who actually know what's going to happen, no one wants to listen to them. Now, I know Jesus speaks of being the fountain of living water, but he wasn't the first, because it was actually Jeremiah who described God as this fountain of living water. And he said to the people that the system they've created, all the gods they've made for themselves or borrowed from elsewhere, aren't actually going to help them cope or survive when Babylon turns up. He said, for you abandoned the fountain of living water, and then built water cisterns for yourselves, cracked water cisterns that hold no water. He said, if you wanted a God so badly, what was wrong with the one you had? Why did you get rid of that one and create a whole load of made from wood and iron and things to carry into battle? It's like, frankly, no religion is going to stop Babylon coming down. No system of belief is going to stop bad things happening. No rule book or list of things that you can follow and do in a temple or a shrine is going to help that much when things get that bleak. Frankly, only the fountain of living water can do that. But Jeremiah, he's got Yahweh. He's got the fountain of living water, and guess what? He's still depressed. Because he says, this same fountain of living water is for me a deceptive stream. with uncertain waters. The NSV says waters that fail. He says, I've gone to you for refreshment, and I've got a mirage, a mouthful of ash. What do we do when the rock of consolation isn't consoling? What do we do when the fountain of living water feels like it's run dry when we're most thirsty? And the answer is, I don't have the answers. No glib, simple answers, anyway. There's no one size fits all. It's not a matter of having enough faith, I know that. I'm not necessarily more confident of God's existence when I'm happy, or less confident when I'm in the dark hole. So I reason God's existence, it doesn't depend on my state of health. I remember that I was sure. And I tell myself that a few stray chemicals in my brain won't erase God's existence. I tell myself, all things pass. This won't last forever. It didn't before. It won't again. Even if, at 3 o'clock in the morning, it feels like it lasts forever. That's not a simple answer. It doesn't work every time. Sometimes I remember I love hiking. Like real proper up in the mountains for a week hiking. With my boots and my rucksack. And about day 3, I'm up there. And it's either hot, or it's pouring with rain, or it's freezing cold, sleet sometimes. I've got blisters. My shoulders hurt. The rucksack's horrible. I didn't bring nearly enough chocolate. I'm sat there, I'm thinking, why did I do this? Why did I ever put myself through this? But I know that some other time, usually around about September, I'm going to be sitting there at home and I'm going to be looking at my rucksack and my boots. And that yearning is going to build up and I'm going to want to be out there again. And Jeremiah says that's what it was like having God in his life. He would go, why? I just know. And then he said, I just couldn't hold it in. The effort of not being God's, of not having God's name, was worse than all the frustration and the grief and the pain that came with doing it. I've got a friend who's a colleague who's going through something very like that at the moment and is really thinking about throwing in the towel because, you know what, God's people are not always grateful. Not always easy. Herding cats. Cats who aren't sure they want to pay you. But at the end of the day, when you've been called, you've been called. When you're God's children, you're God's children. And that doesn't change with the state of our mental health. Still God's children. All of us. Every last one. So, I've got no answers, but I know what's not the answer. It's not about having enough faith. Jeremiah was a prophet. And he was depressed. It's not a punishment. Jeremiah was doing what he was told. He was prophesying just like he was meant to. It's not proof of sin. It just happens. What I do know is that whether it happens or whether it doesn't, God's still love. That when sorrows like sea billows roll, I've still got the living Christ who died for me. Whether I can see or whether I can't, he's still there. I know that it is well with my soul. Not necessarily with my brain, but it is well with my soul.
Amen.